The first groups were created in the large cities. In the culture clubs, they were quite diverse in their genre and their interest, and they were determined by the perceptions of identity and traditions in the context of the ensemble. There's developments. It was important to have classical in form but Soviet in essence approach, and the importance was given to the folk festivals. So all people who moved from Western Armenia to Eastern Armenia have brought with them also some traditions from the West, and the first ensembles have been created in a new environment by the people from Van Sasun, Mushbasan, Alashkert, Musaler, and other regions of the Western Armenia who were settled in different regions of Armenia to maintain self-characterization, close connection with their home roots by chance. Not by chance that first settlement ensembles operating in houses of culture formed from the inhabitants of those communities and the professional commissions of the Republic and Union Olympiads and ethnographic festivals organized in the context of a Soviet culture, once you give preference to bearers of that very heritage, primer folklore. And the popularization of the primary folklore was actually very much appreciated and praised. So, in the entire territory of the Soviet Union, they were organizing different festivals, different competitions, and participants were taking stage in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other capital cities of Soviet republics. And the first one to go on tour was where the ensembles from Sassoon, formed of Sassoon, Van, and other places who resettled in Armenia. They were presenting their musical culture as the primary folklore. This was so much appreciated that it started to spread to other groups which were not bearers of this, of the other ethnic groups, and it was presented as a manifestation of being Armenian or Sasunsi dance or any other songs performed were considered to be a sign of being Armenian. In 1960s, when such groups were quite widespread, the Yerevan Polytechnic Institute, which was one of the frontrunners and leaders in organizing different youth festivals and events, organized so-called Student Spring event and also organized a show concerts for musical and dancing performances and ensembles from different ages and genders from different regions of Armenia and Armenian populate press abroad enjoy folk remnants and gain some knowledge about national traditions, holidays and rituals. So this is called secondary folklore by the specialists, and special invitations had been sent to all Armenian communities in the entire territory of the former Soviet Union as well as to the diaspora communities. It was very difficult
պլանավորված ազգագրական խմբեր եւ ըստ էության մեկ շաբաթվա ընթացքում Պոլիտեխնիկի փառատոնը վերացվում էր պատմական Հայաստանի բոլոր մարզերի երաժշտությունը, մշակույթը, ծեսը, տարազը, ուտեստավանդական արհեստները ներկայացնող
They were popularizing in presenting not only songs and dances, but also cuisine, specific dishes, and other peculiar features of their communities. And the last day of the student festival was organized in the territory of Sardarapat Ethnographic Museum, where it was the culmination of the fest. And after each concert, the participant spectators from different regions gathered in the square near the institute, near the bust of Marx, in order to have a dance. So for the first time in the urban culture, the bearers of this urban culture, representatives of elder and middle-aged generation who didn't know those sounds of Zorna or didn't know those folk songs, for the first times were engaged in this festival. So they were filled with this spiritual energy at the end of this 1 week celebration. They were engaging into these dances and learning some new songs, and I was able to clarify with some of them that people were filled with this mass festival energy, started to feel themselves better Armenians or real Armenians. This was one of the ways of finding a new identity. It was also important that the competition board of Polytechnic Institute representing from were folklorists of Komitas Conservatory, ethnographers and philologists of the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, dance teachers who were calling on all participants, audience, groups to collect forgotten songs or dances or dialects from the elderly people in their communities in order to preserve them. Wearing special garments or traditional garments were also considered to be a high mark of aesthetics, and it was well appreciated by all participants. It was quickly spreading around to the city, and people were immediately learning different rituals, traditions, dishes, etc. Also rituals, narratives in dialects have been presented, costumes and crafts were presented in the same context, and people were interacting with this culture for the first time and trying to personify or revitalize those in their new environments. And it is interesting that in many communities and even in big or small institutions, some folk ensembles were created afterwards, ethnographic ensembles, which were trying to actually replicate this songs and dances. And then our Assyrians, Russians, Greeks, Yazidis, all ethnic minorities were also participating in this festivals organized by the Polytechnic Institute, and some of them were not able even to maintain their mother tongue or many traditions. The Yazidis were better in this case. They were able to maintain their traditional culture and language, but because of these festivals, they were able to go back to their roots, to re-find their own identity and culture. And by the way, they were also encouraged by the specialists to do so. And It was the furnace where different cultures would, or specific features of different cultures were coming to one place, were refined, polished, and then in many cases those ensembles or those groups were led by professionals, by choreographers, choir directors, etc., etc. If at the initial stage those were rather sporadic groups organized with the local resource, later they were taken over by the professionals because they had to actually participate in different competitions, go for concert tours. So it was important to somehow make them more presentable. And all Armenians or different Armenian communities in Armenia, as well as ethnic minority communities, were also synthesizing and synergizing their culture. We had also a group of Persian Armenian students, architects who came to Yerevan Polytechnic University, and they presented a set of Ishkhana bars, so-called Ishkhan dances. And people found accidentally that they were not only peasants, but also there were uh, noble. There was also nobility in Armenian history, and people started to learn those because Ishkhanapar means the dance of nobles. So people started to also take that as part of their identity, and then Ishkhanapar became part of the wedding tradition, and then it was considered to be one of the fragments of the dance of the bride and groom. The second interesting development of this movements and national awakening in the independent Armenia already. Gagik Ginosian presented a special program to introduce Armenian song and dance course in the post-Soviet Armenian secondary schools. And then the new generation of independent Armenia started to learn about the national dances, and we have now, using a popular term, it became a legitimate dance floor. So the area near Cascade became also a platform for teaching national dances once a week. And I do not want also to talk about dance classes in that we have taught in different centers and parks. Those were rather European or Latin dances that we taught, but now it seems that this folk was taken now from the city to the villages, to rural areas, and it was presented as a high quality culture which is important for the younger generation to learn. And also in Cascade, Tumo Park and Narekatsi Cultural Center, we have some small dance floors where people can go and dance. In Narekatsi Cultural Center, then a special center was created to host these dance classes in the winter time. So they became, I would say, fashionable and interesting, and they gradually entered into our rituals and traditions. And now in the restaurants, some fragments of the national traditions are being presented in the form of songs and dances. And it's interesting that taking into account the taste of the client and financial capacity, special scenarios were also created. And they were using, for example, advice of ethnographers. I know that many dance choreographers as well as ethnographers, historians acted as advisors to actually put together those scenarios. My field research showed that such fragments are specifically used, and it also income generating uh, tradition, and this is basically being consumed basically by those who are now living abroad or those who moved from Armenia to abroad. This is true also about the third, fourth generation.
Որն է ավանդական հարսանիքի հետաքրքիր խորհրդանիշը, ինչ ազգային ավանդույթներ կան, որոնց միջոցով իրենք պիտի ցույց տան իրենց
And they want to learn.
այդպիսի սցենարներ։ Բացի այս հետաքրքիր է, որ
They actually order such scenarios. They want to see such episodes. It includes wedding, let's see, jubilee celebrations, also baptism ceremonies. And it is interesting that before the actual, let's say, event, they come several months earlier from France, from Russia, from other places. They hire a dance teacher, a specialist on traditional garments in order to have some elements or even full costume to be dressed during the wedding. And they try to actually order those, I would say, elements which are peculiar to their birthplace. So, for example, there is a famous song, Green Tree Leaf, and people from the community where it was born actually want to have it. The first to do that was Gagi Genosian's dance ensemble, and this members of the ensemble now function as advisors, and they help them to present themselves. At the most important point of this event, then the members of the family start to dance or sing a song from their birthplace or from the birthplace of their ancestors. I was surprised to see it myself, and then I learned that it's a very targeted approach. They bring their kids and grandchildren to be baptized in Echmiadzin. This is a way of indicating their Armenians. It is also interesting to note that among the observations that I had made is when the youngsters taking advice from their parents, grandparents, or from the professionals, or from the literature, they take some elements of the folk culture and then introduce it into the urban environment, which has nothing to do with their lifestyle or whatever, but it becomes, I would say, a symbol of their daily life. One of the luxurious weddings that I have seen, and one from the couple was local Armenian, the other one was from the diaspora. During the dance, the youngster started to dance, a solo dance of a male dancer. Then he also bowed before his parents on four sides of the, or to north, east, west, and south, and then he took wheat out of his pocket and started to sow wheat or throw it to all four corners of the restaurant. And there were some firework done, and then they all started to dance around the bride. There was another group of Armenians from Russia and local Armenians. It was again a mixed wedding. And then The groom, who is from an IT family without any knowledge of Armenian, he knew only a couple of words. He again wrote down before the best man, before the parents, in two four corners. Then he did some waltzing movements, modern ones, and then took off one of the shoes of his bride, put wheat into it, and then started to sew wheat from that shoe. And for example, Yarhushta, wartime dance, is now being used as one of the main dances that the grooms perform during their weddings, and this is interesting. The last point, I apologize. In Armenia Marriott Hotel, during a wedding of our local intellectuals, or intelligentsia people as we call them, we saw an interesting episode. I forgot also to say that he took out of the pocket red atlas belt and tied it at the waist of the bride, and there is also staging of well-known Takfori Mer, the King's Mother Come Out song, which is a wedding song, and in some cases they also engage professional performance. In some cases, those restaurants tend to be a symbol of home, etc., etc. And there was one case when they have asked Marashtian Center to set up a pavilion to actually take pictures of those who participate in the wedding dressed in the specific garments of their birthplaces.